Hello, my name is Carly, and I will be doing the research on a client problem. Today, it will be a problem of noncompliance in the classroom. So, a little bit of client background. I am working with a female student that is in third grade, and so she's 8 years old. She's been diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. She's also a transfer student. She came from a town about 30 minutes away a little over a year ago because her parents weren't happy with the education she was getting at her other school. She's also very high functioning. She can have conversations with anybody about just about anything. She does get special education minutes with me in my classroom. She gets them for math, reading, writing, and self-help goals. So she spends about 4 hours a day with me. So again, our challenge, she's exhibiting noncompliance in the classroom. If she's been asked to do something that I know she's fully capable of doing because she's done it before for me, she will just refuse to do it unless somebody is standing right next to her. When somebody's standing next to her, she all of a sudden knows how to do it and she can do it without help. But if somebody is not standing next to her, she just refuses to do the work and will just do random things. And so our goal for her is to really work without assistance, for her to do the task given to her on her own. Um, when she is not working after the direction's been given to her, she likes to play with her pencil or her marker when she works with expo markers. She'll try and talk to others, or she'll even just stare at a wall. Our current procedures that we're doing right now, at the beginning of the school year, we started out with negative reinforcement. We knew she loved running around, she loved playing at recess. So we thought, all right, if she's not going to do her work in class, then we're going to take away her recess because we knew she enjoyed it. So we thought, all right, if we take something away from her, that might increase her independent work so then she can go back to recess and have fun. We've been doing this for about a month now, and I have seen no change. We're lucky if we get like an English one sentence written. And I mean, they're short sentences. And so it just hasn't been working. So, what I just did the other day is I started to think about positive reinforcement, and we used a multiple stimulus with replacement preference assessment. I picked 8 items that I knew she really, really liked, and they ranged from food, uh, sensory, auditory, all kinds of things. So she had a very large selection. And so the way we started using this, she actually, one of her higher preferences was one of those squishy balls that kids really like with the Orbeez inside. Um, and so I said, okay, if you get a sentence done, you can play with your squishy ball for 1 minute. And we actually got her to write 5 sentences yesterday because of this. Um, my only worry is she's very spacey and she likes a lot of different things, and things can change rapidly with her on what she would prefer. So the article I chose to read and present about today was a method to establish stimulus control and compliance with instruction. I chose this because it was talking about students with autism spectrum disorder, just like my kiddo, and they weren't complying with um, instructions given to them, especially ones where they just didn't like what was being asked of them. And so I know my kid, when I ask her to write a sentence or anything like that, she really doesn't like it. So I figured this would fit well with my situation. So obviously I'm not going to tell you my kid's name, but I'll just name her Proud. She needs to be able to complete tasks without having to have someone near her. And she needs to comply the first time, which is what they do in this article. So the purpose of this article, it was to be listening to directions the first time because it's so vital, especially for kids with ASD. It can help them become more involved in social situations. It's also for safety, especially if we're telling them not to cross the road, without looking. They need to do that the first time. And then if they're listening to directions and doing it the first time, they can acquire even more skills. So the participant setting and materials. So in this study, there were 4 kids. They all had the ASD diagnosis. So Lucy and Patty were both 2 years old. Linus and Charlie were 3 years old. They worked in a very large classroom. It had the play area, the tables, the chairs, and then the toys that were inside the classroom. They had jigsaw puzzles, toy cars, and building blocks. So they were all in a program, and they were there for 3 to 5 hours per day and 3 to 5 days per week. So the independent and dependent variables. So the dependent variable was complying with a low probability of compliance, which they said they just shortened that to low P, demand. The independent variable, they use stimulus control of compliance procedures, so SCP. Um, so when they followed a direction, they got their preferred food given by the therapist on a variable time, 60-second schedule, and this happened for 5 to 8 minutes. The experimental design that he used, Lucy and Patty, they both got multiple baseline design across participants. There was a brief return to baseline with a different therapist for Patty. Charlie, he got a mixed schedule design. So there were 2 different therapists and a parent in baseline and the same 2 therapists in baseline implementing treatment. Linus, he got the ABAB design. So there was a different therapist implementing each baseline and treatment phase, which was then trailed by a phase without reinforcement for compliance with low probability of compliance instructions. So the results. This first one is for Lucy. She responded quickly to the same stimulus controlled procedures. Her compliance with low P instructions, we started out at 9% and then increased to 58% just after one treatment session. She reached over 80% compliance on the second treatment session and over 90% compliance on the 5th treatment session. As you can see over here on the graph, since it was multiple baseline across participants, they are connected for Lucy and Patty. So Lucy's is up there at the top, and so you can see her baseline right there, just under 10%, and then she shoots up and gets higher. Now Patty. So again, hers is at the bottom of the chart on the left. She had two therapists, so that's why there's two baselines and then two trainings with the SCP. So her first baseline, it was high and then way low, below 10%, in those two sessions preceding her treatment. And then with that first therapist, she shot up to a little over 80% and then 90% and then back down to about 85%. And then with the new therapist that she was using, she was about 15%, 16%, and then she stayed with that therapist, that second one, throughout the rest of the trial. And she was there almost to 100% of compliance. Now the results for Charlie. So he had compliance for therapist one, therapist two, and his parents. So therapist one was 20%, therapist two was 40%, and his parents were 40% for the baseline. And then with the low P instructions using the SCP model, his compliance averaged about 86% for therapist one and 94% for therapist two. And as you can see, his parents, he was also just at almost 80% compliance. Now the results for Linus. His compliance with low P instructions with therapist one was at 15%. And then with that second therapist, his baseline was 29%. And then the compliance with therapist one, as they started the SCP, he went right to 92% and then increased to 83 after that first session with the second therapist. So, questions that I have for you guys for my student. How do I possibly encourage her to work for intrinsic motivation rather than extrinsic motivation? She's very wanting things, and she doesn't seem to understand that when she completes work and she gets a good grade, that it feels good. And I want her to be able to have that inside of her, a lot more than just give me this, give me that. I'll work for this, I'll work for that. And then how often do you suggest we conduct a preference assessment? Like I mentioned before, she can be very spacey. Things that she likes, they change constantly. Unfortunately, I can't do one every week. I've got 13 other kids on my caseload, one of which has an elopement problem. So sometimes I'm out of my classroom for half the day because I have to go be with him. And so I just didn't know how often you guys would conduct a preference assessment so we can keep her motivated on what she's doing. And this is my reference for my article. I look forward to all of your responses. Have a good day.